Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brews Bytes. Today, our topic is on-prem versus the cloud, friend or foes, or friends or foes, I should say. Before we make introductions, I want to get some housekeeping items off the table. We have a number of great attachments if you want to look in your control panel. Also, we can answer questions throughout the webcast. If you're watching the recording, we won't get to your questions, obviously, but if you're watching it live, go ahead and try to type them in if you have them, and we'll get to them. If we don't get them, we'll follow up afterwards via email. And let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with introductions. My name's Adrian Herrera, the VP of Marketing for Caringo. And today with us, we have David Boland from Wasabi and Eric Dey from Caringo. David, why don't you start introducing yourself, your background, where you came from, and what you do at Wasabi.
Thanks, Adrian. As Adrian said, my name is David. I am on our product marketing team at Wasabi. Actually, we have two Davids. There's Dave Friend, who's the founder, and David Boland, who is of course me on the product marketing team. When someone yells out the name Dave in the office, I know not to turn around, and hopefully when someone yells David, he doesn't turn around. I've been at Wasabi for almost a year now. My background is I came from a switching and routing background between Cabletron and Juniper Networks, and a few startups in between on the LAN and on the service provider side. And then I spent some time at NetApp learning the storage world, file sharing and object storage there, and then migrated over to the cloud, like all good data should do. Wound up in the cloud, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today with you, Adrian, and you, Eric. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Eric Dey. I'm in charge of the product here at Caringo, and I come from an IT and system integrator background. I've been at Caringo for since pretty much the beginning, and developed our object storage platform up from the ground level to where it is today. That's about all I could think to say at this moment.
Yeah, and so this is Brews and Bytes. So let's start off with the most important question: what kind of brew are you drinking? So we'll start with you, David. What kind of brew are you drinking?
I've got black coffee. On the second pot of the day. Working from home, I find that it's way too easy just to walk to the kitchen and get more coffee. So, so the most difficult part of working from home has been my coffee bill. I've got to figure out how to switch that up with water one of these days.
There you go, Eric. What are you drinking?
Okay, well, first, off camera a second. I normally water, so I'm constantly drinking water during the day. But in celebration of this one, I have an actual brew, and I was telling them earlier that Shiner Bock is all I had in the fridge at the moment, but I did pour it in a Sierra Nevada glass here. So I've got the Southwest and the West Coast both represented.
Good choice. Good choice.
Eric showed us
better than my choices. I'm in Connecticut, and we're locked down here, not allowed to leave or shouldn't leave the neighborhood or the house. But in Connecticut, the liquor stores are essential, so they are open. The problem is that if the neighbors see us coming and going with beer, then they know who's got the stash, and they'll be winding up knocking on my door. So
yeah, we're under the same stay-at-home orders here in Austin, but we are allowed to go to the grocery store, and the shelves are sparsely stocked. But I noticed the beer section hasn't been too bad. So.
Yeah, beer and desserts. There's plenty of those. And I am drinking my water with my San Diego State cup because they would have undoubtedly won March Madness this year, but unfortunately they didn't get to play. So showing pride for my campus there, or for my school where I went to college. Anyway, so let's get on with the topic: on-prem versus cloud, friends or foes. We're going to start with a one-word answer. So, on-prem versus cloud, friend or foe. You answer friend or foe. David, you go first. One word.
Do I have to choose one of those two words, or can I have
one of those two words, friend or foe? Let's see where your head's at.
I'll limit myself to one word, but I'm not going to choose one of those two.
Fine. Go ahead and deviate. He's breaking the rule.
It's friend.
Friend. Eric.
I'm going to say it depends.
Oh, All right.
That's two
It depends.
words. That's
It
two
depends.
words.
That is 2 words.
No,
It depends.
just depends.
All right. So because of your answer and you broke the rules, you go first. Explain
Oh.
the it depends. Explain the it depends.
Okay. So it depends on what the organization's internal DevOps, what their applications are, and where they produce and where they use data. So, on-prem makes a lot of sense for people who produce a lot of data and use a lot of data within their own networks. If they produce and use data up in the cloud, then it makes sense to. There's a lot of economics of using it in the cloud, and then you have people who pretty much everyone who's pretty much somewhere in the middle of all that. So it's a spectrum, and so we'll talk about hybrid storage in a little bit, but there's absolutely room for both.
All right. How about you, David?
All right, so I followed the rules. I used one of the two answers that were given to me, and only one word. So but I like Eric's rules better. So I'm gonna change my answer to a 2-word answer and use the words friendly co-opetition.
There you go.
Right, friendly co-opetition. Yes, there are cloud bigots out there that would say you should be all cloud all the time. Andy Jassy at AWS, is sick and tired of the slowness that people are taking to move to the cloud, and he wants to speed that up. We have a lot of folks that don't want to move anything to the cloud yet or can't move the cloud. So you get your two extremes. But in the middle is the friendly co-opetition, where you have a serious requirement for performance storage or primary storage on-prem, but then there's also a good solution in the cloud for maybe archive or a backup. So we would compete for mind share or wallet share in many times, but somebody who does it right will know what you can keep on-prem and what's appropriate to move to the cloud.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, you talk about what's appropriate to move to the cloud. So let's segue into that. So what are the drivers to adoption for Wasabi that you're seeing today? And has that changed since you opened? You've been around for a few years now.
Yeah.
Have those drivers changed?
Let me give you give the audience a quick pitch on Wasabi if they're not familiar with us. We were founded in 2015 by a couple gentlemen, David Friend and Jeff Flowers, who were the co-founders of Carbonite years ago. They came out of Carbonite in 2015. They had an idea for object storage in the cloud. They saw some problems that were that the existing cloud object storage was not addressing, and they said, hey, there's a market for this. So from 2016 to 2017, they worked on hardware and a file system. And from 2017 till today, we went live with the service in 2017. And from then until today, we have about 14,000 customers who are using Wasabi Cloud Object Storage as an alternative to AWS S3, Azure Blob, Microsoft Azure Blob, or a Google Cloud Platform. We're just another object target in the sky for a lot of the on-prem guys. We don't really compete, with the on-prem storage too much. There is some overlap, but for the most part, we see ourselves as a fantastic target for a backup use case, archive use case. There is a lot of folks that are using the cloud storage now or they want to use it for surveillance video, archiving surveillance video, and the use cases are growing on a daily basis. Really, we see different use cases each week.
Yeah. Eric, same question for you. What are the drivers to adoption for Swarm, and how's that changed? I know we've been around for quite some time, for over 15 years now. So how have you seen the drivers to adoption evolve over that time?
Well, so drivers to adoption there. One of the, Amazon S3 has actually been a really good influence on the drivers to adoption, only because it's a de facto choice of protocol to use. If you watch my other webinars, I won't say de facto standard because it is not a standard. But it's a choice, and I'm glad to see that some real enterprise IT apps have finally chosen it as a viable background for their storage. So backup was an area that we identified very early on in our company. But the problem was that you didn't have any good unified way to get all the backup vendors to write to us. It always had to be a custom integration and go through their their developer programs, and there's a lot of overhead to that. And so now with S3 as a protocol being used widely, companies like ours and companies like Wasabi are just now usable by a lot of different things. And so you're no longer asking people to do custom development work. Although, absolutely there's companies doing custom development work, but there's, a lot of companies that will never write a line of code in their life. And so if their software vendors don't give them the capability to use the cloud, they'll never be able to use the cloud. And that's what has changed.
Yeah, definitely. Like a huge barrier to adoption just kind of, went away with S3. As far as I know, we spoke about friends, we spoke about foes, we spoke about it depends, right? Let's talk about more that it depends. Is the hybrid cloud. So maybe both of your opinions on hybrid cloud, because we hear that term thrown out a lot. So does hybrid cloud work? Have you seen it work? We'll start with you, David.
All right. That's a great question. And I'm a big fan of hybrid cloud. And this goes, and one of the best use cases I've seen of Caringo and Wasabi has been in Hollywood in media production. The performance you guys have on-prem for media workflows is incredible. Your partnerships with media asset managers and editing software, is wonderful. And so there's definitely a good fit for Caringo in that video workflow space. And I think it was last year you had a guest on, Nick Smith from JB&A, who I guess that what are they, a value-added partner, and he had a great presentation, and he outlined like the 5 tiers of storage, right? And it was like, they were very fast. NVMe, right, number 1. Then your fast SAN and NAS, and then you had slower NAS, and then you had your local archive, and then cloud archive. Right? This was a year and a half ago, a while ago. And so he outlined in his business, in his world, and the folks that he works with out in Hollywood and the production houses, what they view as a hybrid storage solution, laid out into 5 different tiers, right? So, that last tier, that 5th tier, that cloud archive, or maybe sometimes it could be an active archive, is where, a Wasabi would fit. There were barriers of entry to that in the past. There was, one of the big pushbacks that we had or we'd seen early on in a lot of spaces were the hidden costs for cloud. Right? Either egress costs or your API puts or your gets or your inventory requests, or maybe you want to transfer your data from one data center to another on the existing cloud network, and you're going to get charged for that. So there were all kinds of hidden costs that drove up the price of cloud storage to where it wasn't that different from on-prem storage, honestly. Right? Mm-hmm. You have a high-performance on-prem storage solution, right? And then on paper, maybe an S3 or an Azure Blob looks less expensive on a per terabyte basis on a per monthly. But when you start calculating the hidden costs of your egress or your retrieval fees, which are 2 different things, retrieval fee and egress costs are 2 different fees. Mm-hmm. And then you have your puts and your gets. Then it starts to add up. So the question was, why would I move all of that to the cloud when the overall cost is probably about the same to keep it on-prem? Yeah. Minus some rack space and power and cooling, maybe, having to worry about upgrading the newer software, bug fixes. Minus that, there wasn't much difference between the early S3 and Azure Blob versus, on-prem. That's changed. I would call it like Cloud 2.0. Companies like Wasabi have come out with new architectures that don't have those fees associated with them. So all of a sudden, you see what was prohibitive because of cost is no longer. So Cloud Archive in this 5-tier model that Nick Smith had mentioned is a perfect fit today, and going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, our next Brews and Bites is going to be with Nick. So if our viewers are interested, they can tune in about a month and see Nick directly and ask him questions if they'd like.
But Eric, bigger.
Yeah, and you guys have done some great job. I mean, one of the reasons why we love Wasabi is the way that you price and your reserve capacity storage. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Eric, how about hybrid from your perspective? Are you a believer in hybrid?
So yes, I am. I agree with what you said, David. Is that it's the original pricing of cloud sort of made sense if everything was moved there. If you moved all your operations there, then you could justify the cost of it. But that's not the reality for practically every company out there. There's a few poster children who are completely in the cloud, but most aren't. And so, the hybrid approach does need to consider all of those costs with it, and consider about what's going to be used on site as what can go up into the cloud. So backup is an area that is basically a big driver for us in the hybrid, any hybrid deployments, and that we have customers that they like the idea of having a disaster recovery backup or copy of their data. And we've had a solution out there for a long time where we can replicate to another site, but a lot of our customers would say, well, that's great, but we don't have another site, and we don't want to, what personnel are we going to deploy to stand up another site? And this is where going out to Wasabi, for example, is great, in that they can just pay as you go with what they need, and send their DR information out to the cloud, where they don't have to keep up with that extra site and the software upgrades and all the stuff you're talking about there.
So I mean, Eric, going into that, like how often do you see that offsite requirement from a deployment perspective?
It actually, we could ask about it practically all the time. And then what I see is that it's not implemented that often. And the barrier to it seems to be that, it sounds great from a business continuity perspective, but they just couldn't stand up another site. And so, until you look at a hybrid option where I don't have to actually create the other site physically or staff it, it just wasn't feasible for a lot of people to actually do the thing that they wanted to do. So that's.
Go ahead.
Oh, I have some thoughts about multi-cloud when we wrap this one up, because that's also often talked about with whenever hybrid gets thrown into the mix.
Yeah. Right now we're keeping it simple. We're just talking about one cloud.
Okay.
And David, but you can wrap up with that, no doubt. David, I mean, that leads to the next question. How arguably you guys are experts at setting up data centers and storage services. I mean, how many sites do you have around the world?
All right, so right now we have 5 sites. We have 2 on the East Coast in Virginia, and then we have Hillsboro, Oregon. About 6 months ago, we went live in Amsterdam, and about 3 weeks ago, we went live in Tokyo. So Tokyo we have a data center where we share. Well, actually, it's NTT's data center. NTT is our partner in Asia, and they're going to build out their object storage, cloud object storage with Wasabi. We have, like I said, Amsterdam. We're going to be growing our European footprint, and then in North America, we have those 3 data sites, and we'll probably see something soon in Canada and South America. So we're going to grow our footprint this year. Right now it's at 5, but we're going to move to a model that has us spread out a lot more globally.
And how easy, explain to our viewers, how easy is it to select one of those data centers? Do you need to be in that region, or could someone in California use a Tokyo data center right off the bat?
All right, yeah. So what's really nice is with the Wasabi bucket configuration, you can choose where you want to put your your buckets. Right? If you say, hey, I want to put it in Hillsboro, Oregon, and you're in someplace else, you totally can. It's not a mystery as to where your data is going to sit. Right. So if you want to be in New York and put your stuff in Amsterdam, totally fine. Vice versa, if you're in Europe and you want to put it in Virginia, totally fine. It's totally accessible, and you have a choice of where you want to put it.
That's great. And Eric, I mean, we talk about on-prem, but maybe describe to the viewers what a standard Caringo deployment means.
So a standard deployment of our Swarm software is a set of standard x86 servers, standard Ethernet networking between them, and the foundational part of our system is basically a bare metal booted server that's got a bunch of disk drives in it. It boots up, it joins the cluster automatically. There's no administrative interaction or actions necessary to go through and tweak with configurations. It just joins and begins participating in the load balancing, and its space and its capacity to do the computations that we need our storage nodes to do. Just it begins working together with the others that are already there. We also, from the management side of things, hardware gets old. Hardware you deployed 3 years ago, 5 years ago, is now taking up more rack space than it's worth. It's generating heat, just as much heat as a new server does, but has maybe a fifth or a tenth of the storage capacity in it. And so our system is designed around the idea of adding hardware easily as well as removing it easily from the system. So our standard deployment is the set of storage nodes that have a lot of disk drives, and then some other ancillary components around it that typically run in virtual machines or in containers.
Yeah, and I think to sum that up, it's really about hassle-free management. And the thing about Wasabi too that we really like is the easy pricing, right? Hassle-free pricing. Arguably, there's no management because you're already in the cloud. Tell us about the reserved capacity storage. I think that's pretty unique in the market from a cloud perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. That's a good point. So, as I said, in 2015, when our founders Dave and Jeff, sat down and identified the space in the cloud object market, they said there are issues with complexity, with the pricing, with cloud lock-in, not from a proprietary perspective, but more if you put your data in and you can't pay to get it out, it's locked in there, right? And then also there are problems with the archive tiers of the glaciers, the really, really cold, really, really, really super cold, the wicked cold tiers, right? Getting your data out of those in a reasonable amount of time is always an issue. So they identified those as issues that they wanted to address. Part of that was the pricing, right? So if you're paying on a monthly basis and you had an idea of what your storage is, that's fine, right? But what you don't know is what your costs are for egress or for retrieval or for your API puts and gets and lists and those things. So it was kind of a mystery. The guys come out and they said, you know what, we're not going to charge for those. We're going to have one fixed price, $5.99 per terabyte per month, right? And that's the minimum at $5.99, and you can grow to whatever you want. What they realized right away was there's a lot of folks out there who don't want to pay on a per monthly basis. Right? You have school districts, universities, government agencies, nonprofits. You have a lot of enterprises out there that have a budget that they have to work within, and they don't want the mystery of what their cloud cost is going to be. So they want to purchase on a purchase order. So what we did was created a concept of reserved capacity storage, RCS we call it, reserved capacity storage, where you can go out and you can buy 50 terabytes or 100 terabytes or any increments of, thereof up to 10 petabytes upfront with a purchase order or an invoice. Right, so you say, hey, I want 100 terabytes for 1 year. They'll give you an invoice, you pay up front, and you don't have to worry about putting it on a credit card. And the reason why we can do that is because we don't have the hidden costs. We don't ask you to put your credit card down to pick up those API charges for puts and gets, or for your egress. So you know what your bill is going to be. And that's a lot of interest to a lot of folks now who know how much storage they have. As Eric mentioned earlier, if people who are being built into the cloud, or they're cloud first, or they start from scratch, maybe on a per monthly billing basis works for them because you're going to grow. You don't know what you're going to be. But if you have an archive or a backup repository or video surveillance storage that is going to be 50 terabytes or 100 terabytes, and it's not going to deviate that much on a monthly basis. Buy that up front, take a steeper discount, pay less, and then just pay with one invoice. So yeah, reserve capacity storage is something that Wasabi can do that most others can't because of our billing architecture, because of the way we offer our service. So if someone's an MSP or a systems integrator and they're offering a backup as a service solution, or they're standing up a production house for video workflow for a period of time, and they know I'm going to need this much storage, buy it up front, take a deeper discount, roll it into your service, and save more money for yourself and the ultimate end user.
Yep.
Yeah. And I know we're coming to the end of our program here, but I always like to end with words of advice, right? So Eric, maybe we'll start with words of advice. You kind of alluded to possibly talking about multi-cloud, but let's give a closing statement or some words of advice to our viewers out there in evaluating, cloud storage, on-prem storage, or everything in between.
Yeah, so I think egress cost is actually something that is critical in considering, especially when you're looking at backups, in that there's always going to be some amount of retrieval that goes on. I mean, even without a major loss. I mean, obviously, if you lost your entire office, you'd be looking at bringing back the entire data set. But just an admin going throughout their normal day, they always get the oops, I deleted this directory, I didn't mean to, can you get it back? If there's a lot of friction around the retrieval, so if it takes hours to draw it out of some glacial type of deep storage, and then there's a large cost associated with it, what's going to be the incentive for the admin to balance when they consider, should I just get you your file back, or should I just tell you sorry? So if that egress cost isn't there, and if the friction around it taking hours potentially to draw that back out of storage, then it becomes something that they can really make use of, and they still have the advantage that it is offsite and protected. So it's not like you have to have the tape locally in order to do the recovery. The other thing is, I won't go completely into the multi-cloud stuff. It's actually kind of the analysts love this concept right now, but I think it's completely infeasible for.
Yeah, they're not loving it as much as they used to.
Okay.
Let's just put it that way.
Well, because it's completely infeasible for all but no one. There's I kind of coined these two things. So Newton's first law of storage is that content in place tends to stay in place unless acted upon by network bandwidth. And then Newton's second law of storage is that content moves slowly unless acted upon by a huge amount of network bandwidth. I'll give you an example. I've got Google Fiber at home, so I've got a lot of bandwidth at home, and I can go to a cloud provider that's got a lot of bandwidth as well. But what's in the middle? I always find that my download or upload speeds can be controlled by what's in the middle. And so, when you're thinking about what needs to be on-prem and off, you need to think of designs where you will have a network bottleneck between you and certain data. So you probably don't want to back up everything. Just like you normally think of in backup retentions, is you think about what stuff do I need to hold on to for a month, or what stuff do I need to retain all the yearly cycles for it. You're going to go through the same kinds of thing with any kind of backup that you look at in the cloud. Is what is the important set of data I need to send off, and then you need to have your backup software or whatever's doing the replication have the ability to do something asynchronously. You need to expect that interconnect will be non-reliable. It could, the bandwidth characteristic can change dynamically. It could go up or down. Right now we're seeing a lot of folks staying at home and using a lot of bandwidth. So, bandwidth at the house suddenly got got slow, whereas it could get fast in the middle of the night when no one's using it. So you need something that can scale that way. Other things is really I did used to do a lot of backup and recovery. I did some training for a VAR with that. And one of the things I'd tell you to look out for is watch out for the lure of the sales pitch that goes that backing up your software is fast and easy to get it into the backup system. Because what you really want is fast and easy on the recovery side. Because in the middle of the night, when you really need to get something critical back up and restored, um, then that's when the recovery becomes the really important aspect of it. And this really kind of goes back into that whole idea of is your archival copy or is your DR copy in some kind of glacial storage that could take, several minutes as advertised, but up to a few hours to pull back. If it's 3 a.m. and you're trying to get some critical application back online before business opens at 7 or 8, suddenly having a restore window that says we'll get back to you when we've loaded the tapes from our system,
And that's
in 3 or 4 hours,
yeah.
that suddenly eats up all your time to do the actual restore.
Well, that's a great point because you don't want glacial storage; you want hot storage, right? And there you go.
There you go.
Wasabi hot storage. So, how about you, David? Words of advice to our viewers out there on evaluating on-prem, cloud, and everything in between.
All right, so I want to echo what Eric said because he's absolutely right. Someone once told me, a customer once told me, he said, the backup is boring. It's the restoration that will stain the underwear, right? So that's the exciting part. If you can't get it back or it's slow to get back, that's the problem. That's when the heart races, right? It's the backup piece that's boring. It's the restoration that is the issue. From a words of wisdom perspective. All right. There's I keep a few quotes in my mind. Right. I got some. There's some good ones out there, but I don't know if it's attributable to anybody. I heard it, my father told me when I left the house in 1986. He gave me some words of wisdom, and one of them was, some of them I can't share in public, but one of them was, if it don't get better, see a doctor. And I always took that literally, right? If you got a cut, it's not healing, or you're sick, you don't heal, go see a doctor. If it don't get better, see a doctor. But as I aged and grew wiser, didn't grow wise, just wiser than I was at 17, I realized that applies to everything, right? So if you have backup and you have storage and something's wrong with it and it's not getting better, see somebody else about fixing it. You don't have to live with slow recovery times. You don't have to live with hidden fees or or cloud costs you can't predict, right? If you don't get better, see a doctor. And if something you don't like about your current architecture or something that's happening in your IT world, get answers from somebody else and fix it, because you'll sleep a lot better and you'll be a lot happier in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually a pretty appropriate way to go ahead and end our broadcast today. I know there's a lot going out in the world, and there's a lot of doctors and nurses kind of fighting the good fight out there. And we have a lot of partners and obviously employees in areas. So we just hope everyone's healthy. We hope everyone is happy. And I'd like to also say thank you to our attendees. So thanks so much, David. Great learning about Wasabi. Thanks so much, Eric. I know about Caringo, but it's always great to hear your viewpoint. And any closing statement that you'd like to give our viewers out there? We'll start with you, Eric, and then we'll close it out with you, David.
I don't know. Closing statements. Said quite a bit there. Really, it's about your application here. It's takes a thoughtful design of what data you have, where it is, and where you need it to be. It's all I could really offer you.
All right, that's good enough, David.
All right, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Adrian. Hey, I appreciate you guys inviting me on today. I love Caringo. I love the solutions you guys provide. Your partner network is incredible. The products they produce on the backside because of you guys are wonderful. And any chance that we can get where we can work together in a friendly co-opetition way, I will absolutely be there because the world is big enough and the market is big enough where somebody needs high performance on-prem solution and somebody needs a low cost cloud solution, and you tie the two of us together, and we're going to make customers and our partners very happy as a team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we already have a few customers together. This is also our partners. Our partners would benefit from a combined solution. And so if anyone out there is interested, please feel free to contact either one of our organizations. And, David gave an advertisement for the next Brews Bytes, even though he didn't know about it, which will host Nick Smith in a few weeks coming up here. So just visit the Caringo webinars page and you can get information on that. And again, if you want any of the attachments, go ahead and take a look at your control panel. And in closing, thank you, Eric. Thank you, David. And this concludes our broadcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.